Good afternoon everybody, welcome this afternoon to the studio. I'm going to do some more work on this dragon. So I need a couple of chisels out. We'll start with just a gouge. Actually, let's zoom this camera in a bit, but a gouge and a flat chisel. Let's adjust it a little bit, get you a bit closer to what I'm doing. I'm seeing less of the desktop. There we go. And let's see if this thing will actually focus. Okay, yeah, it's focused, my glasses aren't. There we go. Right, good afternoon everybody. So it's really just a case of continuing now with the dragon, lowering this wing down to be somewhat similar to this one, before we decide what to do from there. Something I could do with a bit of light. That should do. So today, just carrying on with what we've been doing during the week. Unfortunately I can't finish off the punchcraft because I'm missing one particular thread which I've run out of, and I can't restock until the end of this month, as the shop isn't taking orders again until then. And I don't really want to start a new piece just yet on that one, so I could do some scraper board, but at this stage I just thought I'd do some more work on the dragon. This is you know, obviously takes a fair length of time, and I'd like to move on to something else at some point shortly. So I'm getting some more time in on doing this. Well, actually, and I'll leave that while tonight maybe. So if anybody who's watching is new to the studio, this is relief carving. It's similar to, but slightly different to, full 3D carving. Full 3D carving would be using the whole thing. There wouldn't be this back plate there basically with full 3D carving. It would be a standalone sculpture essentially. You might call it, you know, statue. It's a statue is a full relief, full 3D carving. This is kind of 2.5. It's not quite two-dimensional because we have got the third dimension. They've got the height in here, but it's kind of only half of it. You can't turn the piece round and look at the back, for example. So it's sort of, yeah, halfway between two-dimensional and three-dimensional, hence the 2.5D. Okay, I'm using purely hand tools at the moment anyway. And possibly this evening we'll use a power tool on this, a tool called a micromotor. It's a high speed and sort of better quality version of a Dremel, shall we say. And I'll be using that with some dental bits just to get in around the back here of the head, where there's just not enough space to carve it reasonably. I mean, I can do it with hand tools, and I can also do it with just pure chisels, but it just takes up an inordinate amount of time and doesn't really serve any purpose to force myself into using chisels, other than just to be able to say, hey, it was all done with chisels, which I'm not that bothered about. The majority will have been done with hand chisels anyway. These chisels are made by a company called FlexCut, which is an American company. The name is slightly synonymous with the tool itself because they are flexible. You perhaps won't see that, but it does bend slightly. I can't really show you, but it's got a flex. It's flexible, which I guess is partly where the company name came from, FlexCut. They're a nice quality of tools. I can't really, yeah, I'm happy with them, but I can't really test them comparing to any other particular manufacturers because I don't have any other manufacturers' tools. But they're a nice set. There are literally hundreds of chisels available. They all fit into. There's various handles as well. This is one handle. There's wooden ones. There's palm handles. There's long two-handed handles. There are adapters so it goes into a reciprocating tool, so it can be used with a power tool. So it's quite a flexible system. Right, I did that so I could cut. What I've just done is outline where the wing membranes are roughly, just to help me keep them in mind. And now I'm going to just carve the rest of the wing down a little bit more. I've got to get it down to roughly the same level as on this side here, which is a bit hard for you to tell looking straight down, but is about 1/4 of an inch. I've got to take all this down. But I'm just doing it fairly steadily, keeping an eye out for mistakes, which is something that I've done quite a lot on the other wing, which is why I'm keen not to make them on this one. Okay, that wasn't good. You might have seen that break up, and in fact it has actually split the wood. So I've got a split there, and that's rough wood. That's not good. If that had happened when I'm doing sort of final carving, then that would be a severe mistake that I would have to work around. Potentially it could be disastrous for the piece, or could have been if it had been a final carve. It's not at this stage, so it's not really that much of a problem, but you know, it's something that I shouldn't let happen at all. Yeah, whilst it's easy to say, oh, it doesn't matter at this stage, you can get into sloppy habits like that, and that way then you kind of forget when you're doing the final carve, and if it happens then it does matter. So it's always worth sort of developing good habits when you even when you're rough carving, which is what this is, rough carving at this stage, so that you don't accidentally make those same mistakes when you're doing fine carving. Okay, now one thing if I was you, I should in some ways use a gouge for this. A gouge will, which is what that U-shaped tool is, will remove a lot of material really quickly. But one of the things I'm doing in using the flat chisel here is A, not moving a lot of material really quickly, which allows me just to keep an eye on what I'm doing, but also helps me just distinguish between the two sections of what I'm carving, the wings and the wing bones and the wing membrane. because the wing bones are smooth around, you know, the smooth areas, and the wing membranes are the rough cut areas in between. Now wood grain changes direction around here, so I've got to be careful. I'm not quite sure which is the right direction, that one. You always ideally want to carve in the correct direction in relation to the wood grain. That way the wood will not split across on you, and you'll actually cut it with a chisel rather than prizing it off. When you're carving, you do not want to be prizing wood off the piece. If you're doing that, you've got no idea where the wood is going to split, come off at, and basically, yeah, it'll go wherever it wants to, and wherever it wants to go almost certainly is not going to be where you want it to go. So welcome everybody to the studio this afternoon. As it says on the left hand side, I'm using hand tools. I'm carving, the wood I'm carving is, in America it's called basswood. In Europe it gets called both basswood and European lime. It is a lime wood, and it's an excellent wood, an excellent choice for carving. Or it can be an excellent choice for carving, especially for beginners like me, because of the characteristics of the wood. The wood itself is a consistent density across the grain, so both the rings and the material between are roughly the same density, which solves a lot of issues that you can get when you're carving other wood like pine, where the density is significantly different between the rings and the material between. It's a relatively soft wood as well, which also makes it easy to carve because you don't require as much force to drive the chisel. You know, I'm easily driving this with just my fingers. Now, being a soft wood and actually being close grained as well does make it tend to split more easily than other woods. Now that can be a problem, especially on fine areas like this wing here, the tip for example here. It would be extremely easy to just knock that off, or indeed sometimes with a chisel, putting the chisel in can create enough sideways pressure to actually crack that off, and then you lose it, of course. So that is a limitation of this particular wood. It's something you can work around. Obviously, once you know that it's there and you know quite what the problem is, you can work around it. It's really just about taking care as to how you carve and the depth of you carve around those fine areas. It also makes it a little bit difficult for afterwards, of course, because if someone to try and pick it up like that, for example, they can easily just break it off. Just keeping an indication of where the wing bones are. Now at some point I want to be careful not to go too deep with this gouge, because I'm gradually getting towards the depth that I actually want to carve this wing to, and I don't want to go deeper on this wing membrane than the level I want. If I do that, I'll then have to carve the rest of the wing down even further to match it, and possibly the rest of the body, and then you start a cycle. If I have to carve the body down lower, then I have to carve this side down lower, this wing down lower, and everything else around it starts to have to match. And as I've only got so much wood as well, can't keep doing that forever. Otherwise I just end up with a pile of fire tinder. Oh, 2015-0402, good afternoon, welcome to the studio this afternoon. I don't know, it is something that's on the drawing board to either create a site either directly or in DeviantArt, but at this moment I don't have a lot of finished carving work anyway. No, I don't actually. All my finished pieces are elsewhere. I've got some odd bits and pieces around I can show you. This is a rough piece. This was done out of a piece of firewood actually, and it was done using rotary tools, and I just got them, so this was just trying out some rotary tools that I'd never used before. A quarter horsepower Foden shaft drive and a micromotor, so that was just done completely just the shape of the wood, and just had a go, just see what the tools were like. So it's not fantastically good, but it's not bad for a first attempt. And then what else have we got? Oh yes, I've got another relief carving here that was done on stream. This one was carved into ash, so it's a hard wood anyway, and with the density varies between these dark rings and the stuff between, which makes it hard, which is why it's a very shallow relief carving, which was then just painted. So this was just a bit of practice on the only piece of wood I happened to have at the time, and that was done on stream. It's got a bit dusty at the moment. I should give it a good clean down. So that was some hand tools. And then, because I also use knives, I've just I started, and I haven't got very far, but I just started roughing out a sleeping pussycat using knives, and that was really just to try out the knives, because I've got a pair of carving knives that I've never used before. So just really a start. Lots of starts around here. I'm not good at carving people, so I've got a practice piece going on for carving a person, so full 3D statue there. But that's about it for the carving. But I do other things as well. We've got pyrography, which I do on stream, so I've got a couple of pyrographic pieces just here. These are two cats. Oops. I'll show them one at a time. So we've got one cat there. We've got a second cat. A pyrographic image. Each of these take about 10 hours to do, and they're textured as well. So the surface here actually looks like fur and feels, well, it doesn't feel like fur, but it is textured. So the texture resembles the fur as well. But let's do other things beside the pussycats. We've got this was just a practice piece done on camera's a bit too close for that. Done on a piece of hardboard, so this is just a World War II bomber Avro Lancaster, as it says there. I call this a practice piece because it's done on the hardboard rather than on a whiter wood. Although I suppose you could say it was a night. It's a pyrographic piece of a night landing, so it's dark in the background. Being the artist, you see, you can make up all sorts of stories about them. Another practice piece I'm working on pyrographic wise is a railway engine. But I haven't got particularly very far on that at the moment. But I also, what else do? I do glass engraving, but I haven't done any of that on stream. I'm not going to be doing that on stream because I can show you a piece, but the glass engraving requires that I use either a face mask or preferably at least an extractor, and I can't get an extractor set up here where we are in the studio. Put my hand under it and it's not very good. I could do with a black sheet of paper to do this with. Okay, I've got something here that might just show it up. I don't want to get sawdust all over it. Now let me see if I can find. No, I'll do. Let's use the back of this. So we've got some. It's not showing up very well, I'm afraid, but we've got some. This is surface engraving rather than deep engraving of glass. Again, just an odd sheet of glass that I got given. So we've got a reasonably textured rose there. We've got just, and then it's really hard to see is this one, but don't know. There is just a rose outline on there, but it's the texture pieces aren't showing up very well, I'm afraid. And then a Raspberry Pi logo, and no, it really needs something black. But there's then just a building there. But I will have to, if I'm going to keep displaying those, I'm going to have to get a piece of black paper to show them off with. What else do we do on stream? Yes, do something called Punchcraft. So we just took the material for this out of the way because I don't want it to get. So that's kind of like a mini rug, for want of a better description. But that uses a needle tool to push threads or loops of thread through the material to create an image. Not quite finished yet, but I've run out of blue and I'm waiting on an order coming in with some more thread to finish this. Yeah, with glass engraving, that sort of glass engraving, you can do. It tends to look better if you use deeper engraving, which I'm not that I'm not practiced at all for deeper engraving. They tend to look a lot nicer than just the surface engraving. The surface engraving works quite well on flat pieces of glass, so they can be hung like a picture, for example. But when you start using glasses, depends on what you drink, of course. If you drink something like Guinness, the black offsets it nicely when you do just a surface engrave like that. But they tend to work a lot better if you can deeper engrave, and vases similarly. But if you fill, if you rather than drinking out of them or putting flowers in a vase, if you fill it with decorative material, then something dark, and they'll show off there as well. A couple of other things that I do on stream is scraper board. So here's the very first piece of scraper board I've ever done. That's of a singer and songwriter called John Miles. And then I've got a piece for me here, which is Earthrise, which isn't finished yet, but is getting there. So we do these on stream as well. Actually, it would be the next thing in rotation once this dragon's finished. We'll be doing some scraper board. So I'll just put those away because I don't want them to get scratched. And that's off. Well, apart from one other art form, which I can't say anything about at the moment, which I do on, or have done on stream, and will be doing some more of. But I also make rugs. These haven't been done on stream yet. I make rugs using both latch hooks and needle punch type tools. I do airbrushing. I do high-speed rotary carving in addition to the hand carving. What else do I do? I've got some fuse beads to work with, and I also make models. So I've got some models around here to build. I've got a 1/14 scale articulated truck and a couple of trailers. I have a 12 scale tank to finish. So there's quite a bit will be going on, but can't do it all at once. And things like the models, this studio space I've got available is virtually what you can see here. So it's I don't have a lot of space to do it in at the moment. But yeah, so quite a varied stream. It actually, whilst I can well, any of those things I can do them for days and weeks on end if I want it to. I kind of describe myself as a low attention span. It's not actually true. I can, as I say, I can do them for hours on end, but I do like to keep swapping between crafts, just for variety. And I can never really decide which I would like to sort of do longer. I just like doing everything. So it's streaming is one of the things that's helped very much in that, because it means that I go through a lot of artwork, relatively speaking. I've only been streaming now I don't know, about a month or a month and a half, and I've already done more art in a month and a half than I've done in the last 5 years. Now all those pieces I must try and get photographed and actually put them onto a website or a DeviantArt account, or perhaps both. But there's unfortunately there's only so many hours in the day, and it's a kind of it becomes a case of do I build a website or do I stream? And usually the streaming wins. Not that build, actually, having said which, maybe what I ought to do is build a website on stream. It would not be inconsistent with the sort of things that I do. Since I do any and all sorts of things. Not so long ago I built a quad helicopter on stream. I didn't quite fly it on stream, but I did show the streamer the results of flying it. So that might actually be an idea for a future stream is to build either a DeviantArt or upload to DeviantArt, or to actually build a true website. So 2015-04-02. Or do we just call you the 2nd of April? Do you have an interest in, other than watching, in an interest in arts and crafts, or you just enjoy watching watching people do unusual things, like turn wood into shavings? Knoxhill, good evening. Good evening. Well, it's good afternoon for me, Knoxhill, but good evening to you. Welcome to the studio today. No problem with lurking, sir? It's not a problem. I shall just be here carving. What I'm doing here is essentially what kind of gets called flat carving. I really am just lowering down the height of this piece of wood. There's not a lot of shaping in it. I'm kind of avoiding that. There's a bit which just helps me keep an eye on where things are whilst I am carving, but essentially just flat carving, the intention of which is just to reduce the height of this area of wood. And I split some off there. Normally don't like carving off a piece, but I don't have a lot of choice sometimes. It's too easy to split the edge if you carve off the edge. So yeah, I'm just mainly flat carving. Thank you very much, Knoxhill. It's not looking too bad. I'm hoping I don't get too many mistakes on this wing. One thing I have to seriously bear in mind is where the wing bone is. It's got to be roughly in the same position, so just giving myself a little bit of a going all the way up there. Right, a little bit of a marker indications of where things are, but otherwise just generally lowering the height of everything. Not being too aggressive about it either in terms of carving. I'm shallow, carving it at shallow levels. as I mentioned earlier, this wood actually will split quite easily if I'm not careful. I don't really want to split any bits off, which is one reason the shallow carving won't, well, it will do that, but it won't be as bad if it splits off in the wrong way. But I'm in no particular great hurry with this. I also don't quite know exactly how far I want to go down. So it's a reasonable amount of fun just to do it more gently than in great big chunks. It also actually works as quite a nice sort of practice of just carving in general. To do it in this way rather than trying to take big chunks off. So I'm getting a lot more practice about smooth carving, for example, so carving in such a way that there's no ridges showing. Now that isn't quite like that, but that sort of thing. You also get practice at understanding the wood grain and where it's running, again without endangering the piece. Now there is a wood knot just down here, and a wood knot is where a branch has come out of the main trunk. Most of the wood is most wood is actually cut from the main trunk of the tree, and as you get towards as you get a reasonable distance out from the pure core, you start to see the rings, which is where a branch has come in, and so you start to see the rings of the branch basically, as well as the main trunk, and they all come together in sort of quite a smooth way. But in areas like this, you get the wood grain changes direction a heck of a lot over short distances, and that presents challenges while you're carving. Because the wood grain, carve the wrong way to a wood grain and you either get at best you get a poor finish, and at worst you'll get the wood actually breaking off. And so if the wood grain as it is around here is at this sort of angle, if I so it's coming up out of the wood, if I carve in this direction, the wood grain tries to drive my chisel down into the wood quite deeply, and then I end up carving too deep. I have to carve in the opposite direction because it pushes the chisel out. You can sometimes carve across the grain, but then you get a sort of a mixed result. And it's understanding and feeling that, which is part of the skill of developing carving, in order to understand and feel where the grain is going, and therefore you get better results out of what it is you're carving. Still got to go down further. So whilst you're watching me, you will sometimes see me carve one small bit of an area, as I just did a moment ago, I'll just run, I'll just run a chisel a little bit this way, and I'll immediately stop and just turn around and come from the opposite direction. And that is because I felt the grain, and the grain was going in a different direction to where I was trying to carve, and I knew it would cause me a problem if I continued trying. One of the things you find when you are carving is if the wood is resisting, the chisel isn't quite going where you want it to go, it feels as though something's stopping it. What it is the wood is, the wood is telling you in a way that what you're doing is not right. You should be carving in a different direction, or with a different tool, or just different. And so if you're carving and you feel that sort of effect, it's an indication. Just stop for a minute and think about what you're doing, and should you be doing it in a different way. Generally speaking, it is, you're carving in some way against the grain, and you've got a potential there to do damage to your piece. Now I know in that area there I am carving it in the wrong direction, but it's one of those circumstances where you don't actually have a lot of choice. You've got very limited space to get into. And so if you end up having to do that, one of the things that you need is sharp tools. Sharp tools actually will help enormously. And incidentally, with chisels, the sharper the better, generally speaking. Sharper tools are actually safer, which I'll come back to in a minute. Noxel, how do you choose the medium then? Yes. To be honest, the grain, okay, it really depends. If I was carving a fireplace, for example, which I'm not, it's a big piece, is that, but a fireplace is something where they're going to want to use something like ash, for example, especially if they want a light wood. You'd use something like ash because it's a hard wood. Structurally, it will support lintels and whatever else is going into the main structure of the fireplace. Or you might use oak, something like that, which is a really hard high density wood. So to some extent, if you're doing that, then you ain't going to be using, at least initially, hand tools. You'd either want to be using power driven chisels, or even rotary tools to do most of the work. You might do the fine carving then with the hand tools. For decorative work, pure decorative work like this sort of thing that you'll hang on a wall, then to be honest, it's a case of you want to use wood that's easy to work with, and the basswood or the European lime has the two or three qualities I've mentioned. The even density. It's a smooth wood from the point of view of the grain doesn't show up a great deal, so architecturally wise it's a fairly neutral thing, but it does hold sharp edges quite nicely, which for carving is quite good. If you take something like balsa wood, which daft it sounds is a hard wood, but balsa wood, if you try and carve balsa wood, you've got to use extremely sharp tools, but you very rarely get a good clean sharp edge on it. It always gets sort of fluffy and woolly, and it doesn't show details very well. So the harder the wood, the more detail you get. This is kind of just in between. Mertminator, that's a bit of a tongue twister. Thank you for following the studio this afternoon. That is most amazing, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you very much. But essentially at this moment in time, that's what I've got, Knoxhill. basswood because it's just a lot easier to work with for this sort of stuff. And were to try and have done this with ash, I wouldn't have got this far so far. You know, it takes a really long time to work with hand tools. I'd ideally want to be using a chisel, or as I say, a power driven chisel, more than likely, or possibly even just doing it purely with rotary tools, but and that governs me doing it here, if you like. The ash, as I mentioned earlier, this one is really shallow carved. You can see the difference between the dragon and this. It took enough to just get down to that. It took about 4 days just to outline this. It took about 4 days to outline this, and you can see the difference in material that's being removed. So kind of horses for courses, really. But that's the reason why I'm choosing to use basswood for things like this. It's a decorative carve. It's not, you know, if it gets hung on a wall, it'll be hung on a wall. It won't be part of the wall. It won't be a supporting structure or anything like that. Right, I got this chisel out. Oh yes, I was just going to do some more outlining of where things were. Actually, I probably won't bother from now on. They're fairly... You know, these look like curves, but they're not. They're because the finger bones. Oh, that's how the reference picture shows them, and on bats that's how they are as well. They're the fingers of the hand. The bones go from joint to joint to joint, so they're in a series of straight lines, and that's one of the things I've got to, when I come to do the final carving or the smooth carving at the end, I've got to bear that in mind. It's kind of like a series of jerky or straight lines between the joints, but the membrane between them, like stretched, it gets stretched like on an umbrella. It curves in slightly when that happens, and so the wing bones are straight, the membrane between is curved. Irish Lurker, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to the studio this afternoon. Thank you very much. It's going well, but it's going slowly. I've kind of corrected my mistakes on the other side, or at least enough to be satisfied with. Now I've got to try and do this side without making the same mistakes. Carving across the grain here, the wood isn't fantastically happy with it. You can partly hear that in the sound, and the surface texture is a little bit, it's kind of rough, like a fine sandpaper almost. It's not sharp like sandpaper, but it's that sort of texture, and that's just because I'm carving across the grain. If I find the right direction, and that may be it. If I find the right direction to carve in, I think it's, yeah, it is this one. Then it becomes a heck of a lot smoother. In actual fact though, this area here, so I'm just doing a little bit, this area here now is, you know, I can feel it's substantially smoother, but it's still got like a porous effect. It's a little bit foamy. Now that's the wood texture itself. You know, the quality, or the wood itself has its own internal structure. This area around here seems to be quite foamy. There's an area around here that's a bit like soap, in that it carves like soap carves. This one over here was quite solid, so You know, even within a small piece of wood you can get different textures, and that provides interest to the person carving it. Right, let's see if we can lower this to the right here, above the head, and to the left of the thumb there is just waste wood. I left it in to support the thumb because, as I mentioned earlier, this wood cracks off fairly easily, and so I left a substantial amount of wood there for the early carving to just help support it, provide enough material around the thumb that it doesn't actually get knocked off whilst it's being carved. But as I'm getting down to that level now, I need to remove some of this this waste wood. And hopefully do it without cutting the thumb off. As I mentioned earlier, I don't, with these bits here, I don't pull them off, I cut them off. If I pull them off, chances are I may just break the thumb off, which is something I don't want to do. So I always make sure that I cut. If it doesn't want to come off of its own accord, it means I've not cut it properly. And so I go back in and just keep cutting or shaving until it comes off of its own accord. This wood, as I say, is quite soft. I am driving this chisel primarily just with my fingers. In fact, almost always with my fingers. I don't need to use any more force than that. And if I was really needing to use my whole arm to drive this sort of chisel, then I'm seriously doing something wrong. I'm trying to either do too much, or I'm, really forcing the wood into in a way in which it's not ideal. And then the chances are, because this is not particularly well secured down, for example, that I could the chisel could go anywhere from using my whole arms. I'm in kind of the wrong environment to be requiring to use the whole pressure of my arms. So in this sort of environment, if I needed to use that sort of pressure, what I should be using is a power driven chisel. Because that way, with something like a reciprocating driver on the end of the chisel, I can hold it. The power tool is doing the work, and I just direct. And again, I'm not using force then. The power tool is, but because I'm not using force, I'm maintaining control of the tool. And that's the key thing with sharp tools. Maintain control of them. And if that means working slower, then work slower. Getting to sharp corners is actually quite difficult. What you essentially have to rely on is the fact that the wood will actually split, basically. So that's why you try and, if you're doing that, make it as small as possible, the amount of wood that you're trying to get rid of. There is actually supposed to be a gap down the back of the dragon's head here around the corner. I can't quite do that at this stage. This evening I'll get the when I stream tonight, I'll get the micromotor out and I can use a dental bit to go down the back of there and actually cut this space out here. Don't normally like doing that away from the extractor fan, because the dental bits do turn wood into sawdust, and I mean quite fine dust, and it does get everywhere. But we'll work on that later. Okay, so I've given myself some more space there. Ultimately this goes all the way down to the backboard, but I don't need to do that all in one go. And as I say, whilst it's there, it's still supporting that thumb. Let's apply a little bit more of the U-shaped gouge just around the back here. The reason I'm using the gouge around the back is I've got the backbone here, and what I want to do is keep a smooth transition into that backbone. Now it's much higher than I want it to be. Obviously the backbone, well, it's not obvious, but the backbone is just above the back, like your own. If you ever feel your own back, you can feel where the backbone is. On a human it's sort of dimpled in a little bit, but you can sometimes feel the individual little bones of your back. I forgot what they're called, vertebrae. You know, the little bits sticking out, I won't say through your skin, but pushing your skin forward. On this particular dragon they're kind of the same. They're a little bit more prominent. They're not really great big ridges or anything like that. It's just like the arm, you see, it just sticks out slightly. But I haven't carved that backbone down yet, so by using a U-shaped gouge, what I do is I keep a smooth transition from the backbone into the back. If I'd use the square chisel, I get a right angle, but then I can't fill that in, so it end up having to carve the back further down to allow me space to make that transition. So as long as I keep putting it in at this level before I carve more of the back, then I maintain that smooth transition all the way down. I don't end up having to, you know, I don't end up being forced to carve the back further down than I want, just to enable that smooth transition to be created. I'm now starting to think quite a bit about the shapes involved. It's the sort of thing I should have thought about to start with and didn't. And it was one of the mistakes I made on this right hand wing arm, is forgetting that I needed to make that transition. Wasn't the only mistake I made on that side, but it was one of them. I also do have to think about the shape actually around the neck here, because the dragon has got its head, it's looked back like that. If you can imagine, if this was the neck, my hand and neck, it sort of has done that, and so the back sort of twists around to come up behind the head. That comes around up around in the head. So I've just got to work out how this area around here is shaped as well. And I actually have a different reference picture that doesn't help too much. But I also have to bear that in mind on this side, which is different to on this side, because it's, you know, because of the way the direction of the head is turned. I see the whole neck and curve. This side, of course, I don't. Incidentally, you may be seeing me carving like I was then towards myself. And it may make a few of you cringe, especially if you're familiar with the rule, which I'll put in inverted commas, about never cutting towards yourself. There's a lot of rules that come with using sharp tools. Never cut towards yourself. Don't put your fingers in front of the blade, and all these sorts of things. Many a time, those hard and fast rules are actually guidelines, but they're couched as rules for people who either don't know how to use the tools or don't understand how to use them. So I mean, for example, you get things like pocket knives, and one of the things that they often say with pocket knives is don't get your hand, if the blade closes like that, don't put your fingers like that around the blade, because if you accidentally knock the blade, it'll close and slice right across your fingers, which is sensible. And locking blades aren't usually allowed in a lot of countries, which is what you'd need. If you had a locking blade, it wouldn't be a problem because it couldn't do that. But that's one sort of rule. Now that is a very good rule, but as I say, if it's a locking blade, then that becomes a guideline, not a rule. These, working with sharp chisels like this, for example, driving a chisel this way would be is one of those rules. Don't drive chisels towards yourself, and it's a fairly sensible rule, as you can imagine. This is really sharp. It's about 6-8 inches away from me. You could imagine where it might go, but this is a hand tool. I hold it like this. Now if I drive this with my fingers, and I'm resting my arms here on the table, if I drive this with my fingers, that's as far as I can push. Okay, from there to there. I can't physically push anymore. So I'm stabilising the chisel and driving it with my fingers, and sometimes I'll swap, or sometimes I'll drive it, hold it like this, but I still only drive it that distance. I physically can't drive it anymore. But what you get with beginners is they'll lift their arms off the table and use their arm muscles to pull a chisel, and of course you can imagine what could happen, and what could happen depends on whether they stick their elbows out or they keep them tucked in. So for a beginner who doesn't understand, it's a rule. As you understand how to use your tools and what's safe, where the risks are, then doing this, and even if I do it holding like this, that's a safe thing to do. It's an understood risk, if you like, because I can't physically drive it any more than this. The worst I can do is, and I'm not going to do it, is to try and throw it. And why would I try and throw it? Now if I was using a mallet, then I wouldn't want to do this, because the mallet will hit that and it's a bit like throwing it, so I actually wouldn't be doing towards myself if I was using a mallet. So one of those things. So if you are seeing me doing it towards myself, I am considering the risks. I won't do that, for example, and drive sideways because my arm's in the way. I'll tuck my arm out of the way if I really need to do that, but ideally I'll just turn the piece around. Yeah, drunk raccoon. You actually, generally speaking, you have a lot more control when you're coming towards yourself, because all your muscles work best in the pull direction rather than the push. So you generally have a lot more control. It is, though, about understanding the risks. If you understand the risks, it's a lot easier to do. I use knives. I'll just get one of my knives out. I'll carefully get one of my knives out. These are sharper than the chisels are. So if I'm using this, you quite often will pull it towards yourself, and I'm pulling it towards and I'm using my thumb and pulling towards myself. But essentially what I'm doing here is I'm just curling my fingers, and you'll notice where the blade stops, it's coming up, so my thumb is below the blade angle. So again, it's really hard for me to make contact with my thumb. I can do it, don't mistake me, it's still potentially risky to do that, but you can have some control over it in pulling it towards you. It's a lot harder to do that because you're then going away from yourself here. You are having to use your arm muscles, or you can do your hand muscles a little bit, but it's really hard to drive in this direction because there's nothing actually really pushing the blade. You're pulling the blade, and essentially it can become detached from your hand. If I get caught like that, I can pull the blade out of my hand and then it can go anywhere, and that's obviously not something that's a good thing to do. So quite often if you're going away from yourself like this, you actually drive the blade with your other hand. So I'm using my left thumb to drive the blade, my right hand is just stabilizing the blade, my left hand is doing the driving, or my left thumb is doing the driving on the blade. So you maintain control like that, and sometimes I'm just, as you saw me doing that, I'm using my left thumb as the pivot, so I'm pulling with my right hand around my left thumb to drive the pivot, and again you're keeping control that way. I'm going to put this away. Actually, the other thing that you sometimes see, and it may look dangerous, is somebody doing, I can't do it now, but somebody doing that, for example, that sort of movement. Actually, I just scratched myself. That sort of movement there, or potentially that sort of movement there, and that kind of looks dangerous because your thumb's just in front of the blade, but in actual fact it doesn't, the blade never comes near your thumb. You're maintaining a distance between the two because of the way you're holding the blade. You can't actually make contact with it. The two are travelling together, and because they're travelling together, even quite close together, when you cut yourself, it's because the two are moving relative. You're either that way, so this is moving relative to that, or that way, and again they're moving relative to one another. Two things that are travelling exactly together, you can't actually cut yourself. It's one of those weird things. I'm going to put this blade away, however, it is sharp. What did I do with the container? There we go. Mind you, there again, having said which, if I am using the if I am using those knives, what I'll often do is wear one of these. Let me just zoom the camera out a bit if I can find my mouse. There we go. And what this is it's a glove which is woven with Kevlar fibre, and this when you're wearing this glove, and it's quite a comfortable glove to wear. It's quite flexible. It's not hard in any way particularly. It's a bit of a thick glove. It makes it a little bit harder to feel things through, but yeah, it's a flexible enough thing to hold a piece with quite easily. Yes, you get threads caught occasionally, but what this is if I'm driving with a knife, this will resist cutting quite significantly. So if I accidentally did that, and I'm using just a side of a chisel here, instead of it slicing my finger, it will just well, it won't slice through the Kevlar fibres basically. So it's you know, saves me getting cut, and these gloves have actually done that, saved me a couple of times from being seriously cut. Won't actually stop a stabbing action. I mean, with something like a chisel, it probably would, but if I caught the edge of this chisel with it being a very fine point, or with a knife with the point of the knife, it will actually go through these. So they're not a what's the word I'm looking for? They're not a substitute for doing stupid things. they're a good thing to stop the accidental risk where just something happened, and better than nothing. So they're well worth it if you're using knives. Kevlar gloves. Yeah. Actually, it's a bit, yeah. Lock knives. They're a bit. Lock knives and flick knives, and things like that. There's some odd sort of regulations. Can't actually remember them all. So I know in some countries knives which lock are illegal. I think flick knives are illegal in the UK. That's ones that you can just flick open and then they lock. And require a button to close. But tools are okay if you use the, even lock knives are okay if you use them for as a tool of a profession, or like as an artist, for example. If you make 3D, like I'm using those two knives there. Then I've got two of those knives that I just showed you. If I was using them for 3D carving, then a lock knife is acceptable. If you're carrying it, however, it should not be immediately accessible. So it should be in like a tool wallet or a fastened case. It shouldn't be loose in your pocket. If it's in a vehicle, for example, it should be either on sort of like the back seat or in the boot. And if it's in those cases and you have a reason for carrying it, like you do carving, for example, then it's okay. It's weird regulations like that in the UK, from what I remember. I don't have a particular reason to buy one, so I have known about them. They get called carving jacks, actually, if I remember correctly, in the language of tools. But I don't particularly have a reason to want to take carving tools just sort of out and about in a park or anything like that. So it's never particularly interested me to look into all the regulations over them. And if I'm going somewhere, and I want to carve somewhere, I've got these hand chisels and I've got some nice pouches to hold them in. Thank you, Knoxhill. Okay. Butterfly knives. That's just the ones that just open and close in at both ends, is it? I'm not sure. As I say, I'm not fantastically up on knives and. Butterfly knives. Butterfly knives kind of strike me as being the ones that just open from them. We call them pen knives or pocket knives here. They get, I mean, there's always some odd regulations all over the place. What do I want to do with this wing anyway? I need to get further down, but I'm just thinking about what I want to do with this wing at this stage, because this wing, as you can see, is using my right hand, is sort of, it's curved over, but it's back. I'm kind of thinking what I want to do with this wing. I can curve this one, I can do more or less the same with this, curve it over and back. It could be more stretched out, so straight and back, because at the moment it's got a sort of tilted back sort of aspect on it. So it kind of matters to think about that, because if I want it back, like, you know, tilted up like that, then this area around here is to be higher than down here. Child of a new. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for following the studio this afternoon. It is most excellent of you. Thank you. That one took a little bit of working out. Child of a new. Some interesting names that people come up with for the internet. So what was this? Oh yeah, so you know, if I wanted it back, then this has to be higher, and I've got to just bear in mind how high I want it. If I want it to be down, sort of like that, on both sides, because this one is sort of, yeah, I can't really do it, but yeah, you basically get what I'm sort of prattling on about, really, which is trying to decide just what the final shape will be, and I'm kind of not sure, because I've got to, you know, it's obviously got to be, the wood has got to stop carving it at the height I want it to be. So that's. I mean, this one is almost like it's pulled his wing back and starting to come forward for like an initial first down stroke to lift off. Or alternatively, he's just literally landed on the rock in a similar way with the wing sort of cupped to catch the air to slow and stop him down. So I'm guessing then that one ought to be in a similar sort of idea. Springtrap the Broken Bunny. Your brother has a butterfly knife. Okay. As I say, I'm not quite sure what a butterfly knife is, so. And there's drunken raccoons there mentioned. In some countries they are banned. And in some countries they're not. You get all sorts of things which potentially can be used as a weapon, and once you start doing that, there's all sorts of weird regulations. I mean, in America, of course, guns are not specifically banned as such, and yet certain knives are. Kind of a weird sort of situation. Well, I've got some more to go down on the back. What I can do is carve this area, because this is kind of mandatory. The height of this is kind of mandatory. It's got to match with this. What I do with the rest of the arm and wing can be decided a little bit later. So this first initial bone here is the key one. So the shoulder joint is a fixed point. Where the bone goes from there to the elbow matters, and from the elbow out. So you can postpone some decisions, but only so far. Yes, okay, Noxel, go ahead. Springtrap the Broken Bunny, thank you very much for following. That is most excellent of you. I do appreciate you doing that. Thank you very much. Yeah, some really funny things like that, isn't there? Actually, the whole definition of pornography anyway is a weird one, but we're not going to get into that. That's not something to be talked about on a stream, really, to be honest. I hold an amateur radio license in the UK, and one of the kind of stipulations of the license is that you do not talk about sex, religion, or politics whilst transmitting, because they're the most controversial subjects that can be discussed, apparently, and cause heated discussions. And I think that's a good maxim for the chat as well. You will stay away from those subjects. If you didn't catch earlier what I'm doing here, I'm using a gouge actually to create a rounded base to the cut, because what I want to do is have a smooth transition from the backbone into the back, so a nice curve. If I did it with a straight chisel, I'd then have to carve the back further lower in order to have enough material to create the curve. So as long as I create the curve first, then I can stop the back at any point and go, well, that's that's the right depth. And the dragons have a semi-broad back. This one curves off quite nicely. The backbone I'll carve in a bit later, by the way. If you think it looks rather tall, it is. It'll come in later. We're actually at the right height here. So I've gone down with the back here as far as I want to go. I do not want to go lower at the centre bit here, slightly more at the edge because the back tapers off, but we are at depth there. So now I need to carve the wings away. Again, I need to add a bit more depth now around the wings, because whilst the arm joins, which is no longer visible, but whilst the arm joins the body at shoulder level, the wing membrane is slightly lower than that. Oh, I see. It opens up like that. Okay, thanks Noxhill for that. Yeah, weird. Yeah, it is. Lots. Yeah, I do as well. The sound of the chisel. When I do punch craft, there's a sound to the needle as well going through the material. And yes, it's a nice sound. I enjoy making the sound. So I enjoy listening. Well, I enjoy making it, but I enjoy listening to the sound as well. And actually, there is, and I might shut up in a minute so you can hear it. But there is a characteristic sound to how you cut wood as well. And when you're cutting it in certain directions, the sound changes. When you you might just be able to hear that. But when you're cutting it like that, Mizu776, thank you very much for following the studio this afternoon. That I appreciate very much. Most excellent of you, thank you. When you're carving it like and Drunken Raccoons, thank you also for following the studio this afternoon. It is also very much appreciated that you do that. Thank you very much. As I was saying, when you carve like this, I'm carving away, carving with the grain. It's more of a sort of a shushing noise. When you carve across, it's more of a slightly juddery or a crunching noise, and it's actually because the noise is created because of the rings. And what's happening with the chisel is it's going dirt, 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 from ring to ring to ring to ring to ring, and that's what causes that sort of more rough sound. But the sound of the chisel makes can tell you a lot about the wood and about whether you're doing it right or not. So that. A lot of that was shushing sort of noises, so I can tell which direction I'm cutting. And that's more of that sort of crunchy noise. So you know, even without looking, you can tell how you're cutting the wood. Now the arm bone isn't exactly at shoulder height, but I am going to leave the arm bone at shoulder height and carve the wing membrane down around it now. And this is where I really do need to know to decide now what I'm going to do with this wing. Well, I've never tried bringing a knife through a pillow at Knoxhill, but yeah, you sometimes get that cracking sound. The actual perfect noise is one which I suspect is what you're referring to with a pillow. There is almost no noise at all because it means the needle, which is, if people are wondering, this is one of the tools, but it has what looks like a hypodermic needle on the end of it. It's not quite as sharp as that, but it's not blunt, but it looks like a hypodermic needle. And as you're pushing it through the material, if it successfully pushes all the threads of the material itself to one side, it just creates a slight shushing noise. But if it catches any of the threads, depending on how it catches them, it creates like a crunching or even like a snapping sound. And the snapping sound is literally when it is breaking threads. The crunching sound is sort of in between. I personally prefer the crunching sound, but I know the best sound is the one where you can hardly hear it. But it is somewhat of an audible, an auditory experience, shall we say, when you're doing some of these crafts. Mace Gamer, good afternoon. Welcome to the studio today. Thank you very much. With the V-shape, yeah. You need obviously sharper chisels to create deeper cuts, but they're all, you know, it's kind of the same as well. Even the V-shaped tool, it's just got two cutting blades rather than one. And again, if you're cutting across a grain, you'll get that crunching sort of noise. If you're cutting with it, you'll get that shushing sort of noise. And if you get no noise at all, it probably means your chisel stopped. Like if I carve that way, I'll come to a stop, and no noise means stop pushing. Right, I was going to get a pencil because I now need to start. Mace Gamer, good afternoon again. Thank you very much for following the studio. That is most appreciated. I do hope you're enjoying what you're looking at. I guess you must be, because you wouldn't have followed otherwise. I don't always do carving though. Those of you who have just followed, by the way, carving is just what we're doing at this moment in time on the stream. I do other things, including pyrography, punchcraft, which we've just been talking about, scraper board, and I will be adding some other things as well in a few weeks' time. So there's quite a variety goes on here. No, it's a bit more. It's a bit more over there. So that's roughly where the upper arm and the lower arm going. Are they about the same? Yeah, they're about the same. So that's the upper arm there. So we're going to come roughly like that. So that's roughly where the arm bone's going to go. I kind of need to know that, because I've got to leave, because it's a bone and it's sort of pencil shaped, if you like, and the wing membranes join it at the side, or rather it comes to the side, goes over the top and carries on, because it's like a bone with the skin. If you pull your skin taut, if you like, over a bone, it still goes over the top, but then comes out the side. So I'm going to leave, that's the highest point of the bone, so that I can create the curved shape. So this goes a bit lower, and then we've got this side, the dragon side. Is somewhere around there. Probably should be a little bit thicker there, because in theory that's where all the muscles are. Actually, that's too high. That's too high. It wants to come down there. See, that's one of the mistakes that I potentially could have made. So that's going to be about there. Which means the centre's about, that's better. I'm looking at it in relation to the other side, so the wing membrane, the base of the arm bone is there. I'm sort of putting the pencil at right angles to the body line, so they want to be in roughly the same place, which is what I nearly made the mistake of doing, is merely made the mistake of putting it too high. I'm looking at another reference. I've got two reference pictures, one that you can see in the bottom left and a similar looking one, from which I'm sort of just drawing the outlines that I might want. And sort of I'm just thinking of because this neck is also twisted and turned, I'm probably not going to see, might just see a little bit of the body, but no, that's the wing membrane. Wing membrane will hide the body completely, don't make that mistake. So that's just going to go straight around there like that, and that's wing membrane. Okay, Boom Boom Baby RS. Good afternoon, welcome to the studio. Thank you very much for following. That is most kind of you. I do appreciate that. British people with all their awesome arts and crafts. Well, thank you for calling me awesome. Or rather, I suppose you just calling what I'm doing awesome, which is still great. Thank you very much. But I don't know if all English people are the same. That's a bit like saying all Australians are party all the time. Yeah, it's 1600 for 1600 hours or 4 p.m. here in the UK. Yeah, so that puts us about seven hours apart, Knoxhill. And 10:55 for Spring. Oh, the Spring Broken Monkey. Okay, yeah. Spring Trap the Broken Bunny. I apologise. I'll get the words out. Ah, but you can sculpt. So all you're lacking is practice. You see? That's all it is. Yeah. People, if people think I am good, it is only because I practice. I had to do this for the first time once. And my first one was a leaf. And I didn't, well, I don't think I did too bad. I wish I could find it and show you, but I can't. I am quite lucky in that I've been able to pick this up quite quickly, but I'm by no means a good carver. I'm probably a terrible carver. I'm also a relatively slow carver, so. But it's all about practice more than anything else, and that's all it is. You know, practice improves things. I wish I could find lots of modelling shops, to be honest, Drunken Raccoon. I do have one near me, but that's remote control cars mainly. So in terms of modelling shops that sell things that can be used for craft work, I'm in Yorkshire in the UK, and well, there's things like Hobbycraft, which is a national chain, but you wouldn't get things like carving in there. It's mainly things like the typical crafts, shall we say, card making, drawing and painting, and needle crafts. That's kind of the mainstay of most of the hobby stores, and then you'll get other things, but you can get things like beads, but that's associated with sewing and knitting and things like that, and bits and pieces. You certainly might find the scraper board, but it wouldn't be the board; it would just be the prepaid kits. So I'm trying to think what pyrography. Yeah, they do a pyrographic tool, but it wouldn't be one that I choose to do the stuff I do. So I find it quite hard actually to find stuff. Yeah, you were down in Uxbridge. Okay, that's a bit further away from me. My geography is terrible, so I'm more likely to know where Australia is, for example, than Uxbridge. I guess kind of the tabletop games is probably a little bit, like the Warhammer stuff, I guess, is probably a little bit more prevalent because there's a whole chain of shops in the UK which seems to be in the busy shopping places. Was it Game Workshop, I think, which cover those sorts of things, but go that way. And again, the the joint from the wing membrane to the bone, it wants to be a smooth transition, a curve basically. So I'm just again using this U-shaped gouge to do that. I think what I'm going to do with the wing is I'm going to tip that edge down quite a bit like this one. So I'll kind of mirror this side. Now this side here is side of the body. I'll round this off in a minute, but again the membrane joins the body in a smooth curve, so and incidentally, talking about driving chisels, this is one of those situations where you don't actually want to be using a lot of force. What I don't want to do is drive it into the body, so I've got to stop and I can't put a stop cut there. A stop cut would be where I would drive a chisel straight down. No, I can't. Straight down, and what it serves to do is when you're driving a chisel from the other direction, it stops splits, but it also momentarily stops the chisel, and you can actually feel it and you can stop pushing. But otherwise, if you're not careful when you're driving a chisel and you're trying to, it's been a little bit awkward and you want it to stop at a particular place, you've got to be really careful. It can be very easy to just keep driving it, and then you take a whole sliver of stuff off that you didn't actually want to lose, and then you start banging yourself on the head and telling yourself off and things like that. Quite often, you know, the odd profanity will sneak in as well. The wing bone one's the hardest to get the right depth. So we're probably somewhere around there. Join that back up there. I'll still deal with that later. I'm going to do one on the other side of the wing now, because this is membrane in front of the arm. Right, I almost, yeah, well, close. Making a mistake I was. And I've possibly made it now, but we'll see how well in practice it works. I've got to remember, of course, you've got to join the body. It's not a straight edge. It's got to curve in, and I kind of did forget that. I think I'm going to be okay. Yeah, I think I'm going to be okay. But that's the sort of, you know, simple detail mistake. But it, and potentially not a lot of people would notice it, but I would. And it'd be one of those sort of mistakes that bugged me, especially if I couldn't really do anything about it, and I don't. At this stage, having carved the other wing already, and got it after about the 4th attempt, got it about what I wanted it. I don't really want to have to recarve that, and that would be my only recourse. if I really wanted that curved edge there and I hadn't got it, of lowering this wing down and then lowering this one down to match it as well. That would have kind of been my only recourse. And I don't want to lose any more height if I can avoid it. Now it's really hard to create to carve a flat surface with a gouge, or certainly with a very strong gouge, U-shaped gouge like this. It becomes a lot easier when you're using gouges like this, because of the angle is almost flat, but it's not quite. The only problem with that is these wide gouges, I can't get them in there. I can use this flat one a little bit, but I'll really have to be careful. Now then, I need to come down the arm on the outside here. Not too bad. Just thinking I'm getting towards wanting to sharpen this chisel. Right, I've outlined the arm a little bit. What I'm going to do now is just round that over a little bit, and then we'll see how much I need to do. Now I might not say, I'll just show you the sort of thing. You have to be careful using a flat chisel when you're doing this. Find my mouse, just zoom in a little bit. Now you can see a dark mark there, just down there and down there as well. That was when I was coming along this edge here. I've just caught the base there. Now that mark has got to go away, and I'll have to get the gouge on the bottom of there to get rid of that. So that line then, so this bit of the wing therefore will get carved a little bit deeper than I intended. And so, you know, it's very easy to do with a flat chisel. It's just not realise and just catch an area of wood that you didn't intend to catch. Sometimes it can be really hard as well because of you're trying to create a smooth transition, but that's part of the skills that you need to develop. As you can see, I'm not very good at it. No. I think we need to go a little bit deeper. So I'm just really fine carving around the edges here. I just want to create a smooth semicircle, hemisphere, however you want to describe it, but sort of a bump. And I'm going to sharpen the chisel because I need to do this using really fine slivers or shavings. I'll show you what I'm doing. Zoom this back out. So all I'm doing is putting some polishing compound onto this leather strop. So it's just a solid polishing compound. Just get rid of it. And now I'm not exactly, well, I am sharpening this, but I'm not sharpening it with a stone. I'm sharpening it just with a polishing compound because that's all it actually needs. So I'm just dragging. I'm holding the chisel flat against its cutting edge, which is this silver one that you can see on the end of the chisel, and dragging it backwards across the strop. And that sort of polishes the edge to a fine sharp point. It actually does a little bit more than that. It actually causes the edge to curl up slightly as well, which would make the chisel feel blunt. But I will actually fix that before I finish this exercise by turning it over and just running the chisel backwards a couple of times, which straightens that curl out and leaves it as the cutting face. I think I might need a new strop before long. This one's getting a bit too loaded up with polished metal. Okay, so I just need a bit, but it's getting a bit black, and that black is actually the metal polished off the chisel or chisels. Right. Now this is significantly sharper than it was. Which when you're cutting it in the wrong angle to the grain helps enormously. Now, this is real detail carving. Now normally you don't want to do detail carving at this stage. You're block carving, which is roughing out. But what I want to do here is make sure I go deep enough on the sides to create a curved shape, and I'm not quite sure how much that is. So I'm creating that curved shape now, or trying to, and if I haven't got enough space to do it, I know I need to go deeper. So I'm kind of doing detail at a stage when I wouldn't normally do it, because it's actually going to help me decide where I need to get to. I'm going to do a little bit about the sides of the dragon as well. Transition from the body into the arm bone is going to be quite challenging. for somebody like me who doesn't know what they're doing. So I'm being very careful at this stage, not because this may end up being you know, almost my final finished surface on these bones, and I'm trying to be very careful, especially around the joint here, not to carve too deep, because I've got no real way of fixing it if I do. Usually somewhere around here I find myself with my tongue stuck out of my mouth at just the right angle. So please excuse me if I'm a little bit quieter than normal. I'm just really concentrating on what I'm doing. Okay, that's a little bit off line. And of course, when you're trying to carve a curve with a straight chisel, what you're really just doing is creating lots of small flat surfaces, like a hexagon bar, but you know, as you get more sides to it, it gets smoother and smoother and smoother. And that's kind of all I'm doing here. Now there are sort of reversed gouges, so where the cutting surface on this gouge is on the outside. You can get them with the cutting surface on the inside, and when you do that, you can use them to create curves like this, because creating a curve with a curved blade is easier than creating a curve with a straight blade, but I don't have any of those. Now the elbow looks in about the right place, but that inner edge of the arm is a little bit too... The arm's a bit, the lower arm here is a bit too fat. So let's switch to a gouge. Let's get rid of this material here. Again, I'm not pulling it off, I'm cutting it with a chisel. Let me just see if I've got a paintbrush. Yeah, just to help brush out some of these bits. So I can see what I'm doing. That looks a bit better in terms of where I want it to be, I think. I might do some more work around the elbow in a minute. As you might be able to see, I'm taking very, very, very tiny slivers of wood off. I'm actually trying my best not to take too much off. I really want it to be really, really fine at this stage. Actually, what it is, yeah, I haven't got quite enough definition on the outside here. It kind of just floats. It's too. The transition is too gradual. I need it to be a little bit more steep or a little bit more aggressive of a curve. Two, you, yeah. That one, two, you know what? I'm sorry, but I just cannot even think of how that would be pronounced. If you would care to spell it phonetically for how you like it, I will try my best. But as it stands at the moment, I will have to shorten your name to something like Tuquaz, because I cannot pronounce that any other way. I half suspect you've may well have done that on purpose to make it hard to pronounce, just to see how much fun you can have getting people to try it. But thank you anyway for following the studio. That is very amazing. Thank you. I do appreciate it. Baby Tears, good afternoon. Welcome to the studio. And 80 Fall Guy, thank you for joining as well this afternoon. Good afternoon to you. And Tuquaz. Okay, in that case, however I pronounce it is right then, but you must enjoy having fun trying to see how people pronounce that. Dear. But thank you for joining, for following. That is fantastic. Right, I'm just going down the edge of this bone again. It was a bit thick anyway, but I also wanted a sharper transition into the membrane than I got. So I just need it to be a little bit more aggressive. Dear. Now just round up, dear. Round off the edge. Of the bone. Okay, that's not so bad. His upper arm bone though is still a bit not quite enough yet to round off properly. I'm going to get a different chisel out to help me with this. Great big tool wrap, and with just one chisel right in the middle. I've got here is a skew chisel. It's so called because the end is skewed. Instead of being straight, it's skewed at an angle, and it's actually cuts on both sides, which is useful because it then means it's not a left or a right-handed skew chisel. It's both. But I can use it more like a knife, and because of the point, I can get into some awkward angles like around here, and that's not deep enough, which is part of the problem I'm having. And rather than mess around, let's make it a bit deeper, which will then make it easier. doing quite well, thank you very much, 84 Guy today. The wounds are improving. The stitch marks are starting to disappear a little bit, which is good. And they're not bothering me, which is also good. Although I was cutting the grass this morning and they did get a bit tired, shall we say. But at least the grass is cut for another few days. Now then, I'm going to cut this in the opposite direction, which this wood does not want to cut in. So I'm going the wrong way with the grain, but I don't have a lot of choice. So I can't get into the corner otherwise. I know I picked a dragon to be a little bit of a challenging piece, on top of the fact that I just like the picture of the dragon and wanted to have a go at doing it. But I think next time, if I want to pick a challenging piece, I have to think about just what the challenges involved are first. The main ones here actually have not been the shape, which I thought it might be, but the tiny spaces and the awkward angles. To try and get chisels into. I'm not sure I'd choose this piece to do again. As I said earlier, it's hard to smooth an area out with a gouge without using really flat gouges, which I just can't get in here. So I will try and do it with the flat chisel, but ultimately I may just actually have to use a little bit of sandpaper, or even just a scraper in this area to smooth it out once the carving's done. Dear. I often find myself holding my breath as well while I'm doing this, so I need to just catch my breath. So I should try and do is get a curve in there. Okay, well now let's try the skew chisel out again. Actually, I'm going to go and try a little tiny V gouge just to get down the edge, so this interior bit of the arm, just that crease there. I shall round it out a little bit with a little tiny gouge, U-shaped gouge. I'll come back in with the skew chisel. Right. A lot of concentration, I'm afraid, in this. As I mentioned earlier, I have a tendency to go quiet when I start really concentrating on something. Dear. Kind of worrying about nothing at this stage, but I'm just trying, because I'm kind of very wary about making the same mistakes I did on the other side. I'm trying to just understand where all the shapes are, so I'm doing a bit more fine carving than I normally would, just to establish all the shapes and know that I'm not going to end up with a big area that I'll have to recarve. Oh, sometimes you just can't get the right chisel. Ow! scratched myself slightly with this one. Didn't cut myself. So if there's anybody in the stream that was hoping to see blood from the use of sharp objects, I'm glad I disappointed you. Not that I think any of you are actually here for that reason. Right, I'm starting to get a bone shape now, or an arm shape that I'm happy with. So we'll be able to move on to some of the more less detailed other areas, just to make some progress in a moment. Now I just noticed here I don't have a smooth transition into the neck for some reason. So I'm just going to carve a little bit of one in there. Just because all this is quite a complex shape just around in this area here, where I've got the wing and the neck and the body all come together into an area that should be quite smooth. Now I've not carved the neck yet, so I just really want to get rid of what is effectively just a step there. Now that arm I'll probably do some more work on, not this bit of area, just around here. As you can see the black pennies there. That means I've not carved that area, which means I probably will need to. But I do have the shape established now. And we'll deal now, we'll worry about in there later. Okay, so I now need to join this membrane to the body at about the same place, but I think that wing bone may need to go down a bit further. The shoulder's in about the right place, but I think I'm not sure the wing membrane is just yet. Still got to be a bit lower down than that. Okay, well before we go any further with that, we'll carry on with doing some more shaping. The very definition of patience required, AD Fall Guy. So I think your craft requires a lot more patience than mine does. But I can't really say about anything about you just watching my stream while you're doing something else, can I, AD? I mean, that's precisely what I was doing yesterday. Yeah. No, I know that frustrating feeling. When it's happening to me, I can feel the adrenaline building up in my body, and my toes start curling, and when that happens, it's a case of, well, it's time, now it's time to walk away. Come back in a little bit. I've got that body to reshape on the other side, but let's cut this wing membrane down a little bit. It'll be more or less in a straight line from the elbow to the body. But with a slight curve that way. Okay. Ow. Sorry, just reading your last comment, Adi. Dropping it 10 times. Yeah. Been there, done that. Oh, I never let it win though in the end. It's just a case, walk away, come back, and then I'll do it, you know, calm down a little bit and come back and beat it. I can be persistent. Just sometimes I need a little bit of a rest just to let the adrenaline drop. What I haven't decided to do, whether or not to do yet, is to actually undercut these wings. So once they're actually substantially complete, one of the things that I can do is go underneath the edge of the wings and actually carve underneath. Sometimes that's called, well, it's called undercutting, but sometimes gets called creating a shadow line. And the shadow line gives you the illusion that there's nothing underneath the wing at all, when in actual fact there's, you know, the rest of the block of wood. I haven't quite decided yet how I want to handle that. Kind of does need it, otherwise the dragon sort of doesn't look right, but it's not going to work very well. We'll go back to this. Oh well, they've probably just forgotten about it like I did, Fall Guy. But that's just the artist in me, you see. Spotting shapes and what have you. It just, there was just something that didn't quite click as being right. Well, it's an excuse to get the airbrush out anyway. Any excuse to do art is usually a good excuse. I'm trying to cut a curve neatly and completely against the grain of the wood. Which doesn't help in the slightest. Yeah, we're sort of getting there. Now it's going to help a bit if I now actually carve some of this backbone down. So I shall do that. As I mentioned earlier, this backbone is just kind of like a, well, it's a small ridge or a bump along the back. I'm going to flatten this off a little bit. So I'm now carving the other side down a little bit more to match this side, which is flatter. More. Lots of junk in the way, 84 guy, eh? somehow I understand that I have reason to identify with that comment. Now I can't go any more further with that chisel without really digging it in, because I'm going. The angle it's going in at is means that the sides are holding the base off the bottom of the U. I need to carve the back down a little bit more. I've got a poor transition in this area here, which is kind of not surprising. But the real awkward thing is getting in there. To just smooth it off. Right, so let's carve a little bit more of this backbone again. To bear in mind that this, just around here, it transitions around the neck. Actually, it's quite a strong transition as well. Yeah, it almost disappears. Sometimes it helps when carving to actually follow the shape that you're wanting to create. So the backbone I'm wanting to transition around there. The body itself kind of isn't, which is a little bit off. I can do something about that as a carve, but if you follow the curve around rather than stopping and trying to carve it in a separate piece, you get a smoother transition. Now this dragon doesn't have any sort of back spines or anything like that. Which I'm kind of glad at, because this wood probably wouldn't support them. I could carve them, but they'd probably knock off very easily. Good afternoon, 3D bloke. Sorry, I was busy concentrating on my carving. Welcome to the studio. Yeah, I just got a chance to put your feet up. I see, no problem. And you have to return a table saw. Okay. There are times when I wish I'd have the table saw, and other times I don't. But okay, I'll see you probably this evening. Well, maybe this evening if you decide to drop into the studio when I stream this evening. I'm just doing now is rounding up, well, shaping and rounding off the back ridge. Which is a lot of really fine sort of carving. Feels a bit thick. So I'm doing is using the gouge to narrow it. The gouge being rounded on the bottom creates a smooth transition from the ridge to the body. Which makes the life somewhat easier when you're trying to carve, because with a straight blade you can't actually create an inner curve. Okay, I've not even seen anything about it, to be honest. I haven't noticed, or nothing obvious has jumped out to me as, you know, press here to reduce stream delay. Yeah, so I'm just using a little tiny gouge just to tighten up the curve. It's a bit thick around there, but we'll deal with that shortly. Okay. What, in OBS you mean? No. Haven't noticed any settings in on Twitch itself. I mean, I guess all it's doing in OBS terms is just shortening the transmit buffer, and then of course you've got that assumes your processor can keep up with it and everything else. On the Twitch settings page. Okay. On Twitch settings. No, I'll have a play with it later. I'll have a look later rather than now. Settings, channel and videos. Okay. Settings. Profile. Channel. And oh, the settings are right. Yeah, gotta find the right button. Channel and videos. The settings things is almost so hidden that you don't notice it. Yeah, I'll have a look. Yeah, I found it free. Thanks. I'll have a look later. That must mean that Twitch is employing quite a big buffer as well, which is funny because I thought they just passed the stream straight through. So all they must be doing is effectively shortening that buffer somehow. Otherwise I can't, and I guess people with slower connections must be taking stuff in burst. It's about the only thing I can think of that would cause people to buffer more often. If there's less stuff in a buffer on Twitch, then there's less to go out in the burst, and therefore less. Yep, less held in the client. That net ridge is still too thick. There we go. Just caught myself with the edge of that chisel, and I've got a slice of skin. Fondescence, thank you very much for following the studio this afternoon. That is most excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah, again, just slice the skin slightly. I've not cut myself. No blood, but that's just how sharp these things are, and it was just caught the edge. Right, now what I want to do is narrow down this spine, so I'm holding a chisel more so the side of it is against the top of the body. That will actually stop me going downwards into the body, and it will actually just narrow the spine. It's really in the end just wants to be the narrow, almost a narrow bump, but Do the same on the other side, so we keep it centered as much as possible. And then we switch to the tiny one. Okay, and then we'll go back to the wide one to round it off, and I'm carving the dragon and the chisels are carving me. Yeah. Yeah. See, they weren't throttling you, they were traffic managing you. It's a completely different thing. Same effect, but completely different thing. Mm-hmm. There you go. We'll stop in a minute, I think. Still a little bit wide. Now that doesn't look too bad, so let's just straighten, smooth out around there a little bit. That neck ridge is still a bit much around. Okay, I may carve that back a little bit more. It seems a little bit too flat, but not just at the moment. This chisel needs sharpening again. Right, dust that off a little bit. Let's take a look at what we've got. Should get a bigger paintbrush out to do this, but it's done the job. Right. That back wants to be slightly lower to match this, but this probably wants curving off a little bit. Just touch. Needs to smooth the transition out into the hips there. Otherwise that's not too bad. This area in here wants sorting, and behind the neck. wondering if actually to cheat and just sort of, I may just cheat rather than digging that area out in there. What I may just do is leave it as though his neck's right up against the wing membrane. Not altogether sure it will make any difference to it to cut it out, so I may just leave it in place. The arm bones don't seem too bad around there. Maybe need a little bit more definition just on the shoulder. No, not bad. I beat you to the shorts. I've been wearing them most of the day. But there you go, that's partly to aid with the fact it's always so warm in the studio. But I am covered in sawdust and chips at the moment. Right, guys and gals and pussycats and dogs. It's what time is it now? It's 20 to 6. It's time I got some tea and did one or two things. Yeah, that one. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Looks a heck of a lot better now. There's probably some more carving to do around here when I put the actual finger bones in. But and same on that side. But we can sort that later. Yeah, it's 20 to 6. Time I had some food, and then to go get a bit ready for tonight's stream, which will be in 2 hours and 20 minutes. So time to get a drink. I've now been streaming for what, 3.5 hours almost. So I could do with something to drink. As I say, it's tea time anyway. So what I want to do is say thank you all that have followed me this afternoon. That has been absolutely fantastic of you. I really do appreciate it. I want to say thank you to anybody who is just watching and isn't following. But of course, I would very much appreciate it if you did follow. And of course, the advantage you get from following is that Twitch should tell you when I go live. I do say should, although I have a copy of the iOS app, and that does seem to work quite well. Although, having said which, I wouldn't actually know, I suppose, if it told me late, because every time it tells you, and I go, look, they're streaming, which of course is what I expected. But anyway, if you would like to have Twitch try and tell you that I go live, the detail, the follow button is below the window. And if you don't trust it, then there is also my Twitter account down there @Zaragonart, also below the stream window. And when I start streaming, a tweet does go out to say that I start streaming. That's about the only tweet I ever send, so you're not going to get inundated with it if you'd like to follow me on Twitter as well. Apart from that, this has been a bonus Saturday afternoon stream. I don't always stream on Saturday afternoons. Can't guarantee. Well, I won't be doing it for the next couple of weekends, that's for sure. But I can't guarantee any particular weekend stream during the day. Caffeine Free 135. Thank you very much for following the stream. I do appreciate it. That's very nice of you. Thank you. But I will. I normally stream on an evening from 8 PM in the UK. That's 1900 hours GMT. Or generally, if you can't be bothered asking Google what time that is, then look at your clock. Add 2 hours and 20 minutes to it, and that's when I'll be starting again. And I do start round about that time each night. Although, as I will give you advance warning of now, next week and the week after I am not going to be able to stream. I'm going to be away from home, and therefore there won't be any streams for a little while from next week, for a couple of weeks. Apart from that, I'll see you all in about 2 hours 20 minutes, I hope, and have a good afternoon.